Hello, welcome to this week's podcast of Two Men in the Middle, where two men in the middle of the country give news and perspective from center left and center right. I'm Brandon Kinnig.
I'm Craig Huey.
Well, Craig, we are 19 days out from Election Day.
Yeah.
We have seen Trump return to giving in-person rallies, no qualms about exposure, no attempt to even be cautious in his approach at all. And both you and I had discussed this too, saying that if he did do this, this was the end for him politically. And I still believe that, although I think that the lack of reaction is just due to the fact that I think this is baked in, right? Everybody assumed he was going to do that. There isn't really any shock about it because he is being true to form. Yeah. But again, it's an example of how we've become numb to this type of behavior. Yeah. Like anybody else, any other time, during anybody else's presidency, we would be focusing on this and reacting to it, and we are not, just because there's so much being thrown at us on a daily basis.
And there's no new content in these rallies. They're the exact same thing.
Rehashed, tired, old, political attacks and talking points.
Now he's begging suburban women to like him, and they have to do it now because he's out of time. So just like me and vote for me.
Did you see that quote from that one rally where he was begging and he said, I saved your damn neighborhood? Like
I don't.
I'm like, wow, way to appeal to suburban women. They're going to love that.
Yeah. Every time I watch
to be patronizing.
Yeah.
Every time
I watch a Trump rally, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Who is this for and what is the message? He hasn't, and he's made no improvements in that area. These are still the same rambling, incoherent rallies that they always were. There's no real message. There's no real articulation of a second term governing philosophy. These are, again, just things that make him feel better on the campaign trail. They're for nobody, and it feels like they're doing nothing too.
No.
So, I mean, at least people used to get or treat his rallies as kind of like looking at a train wreck. Now, I don't think he's even getting the horror response of let me tune into this for 15 or 20 minutes just to see what kind of silly stuff he does. I don't think they're even attracting that kind of attention.
They're not, and that has to be frustrating for him because as the reality show president, he thrives on ratings. And
this is all he's got.
He gets the best ratings of anybody.
Yeah.
And we've seen when he did his last town hall, I think on ABC, his ratings were very low. And so there's been this downward trend in terms of watching him because we've seen the train wreck before. There isn't any new material. So there's nothing new left to see. And most of us, I think, are just mentally and emotionally exhausted by it all.
So you're telling me, Trump doing a little dance before Florida, that didn't humanize him, or telling the whole crowd he wanted to kiss everybody.
What was that?
Including the men, but only the attractive women.
Right.
So,
take
you
that,
ugly
take from that what
middle,
you want, right?
Yeah. I nothing about this makes sense. There is no message discipline. There is no communication strategy. This is him just flailing from now until election day.
Yeah.
And I don't see these rallies really doing anything or helping his cause in any state that he visits.
No, I mean, they're just ginning up the diehard, passionate segment of his base that's going to turn out for him anyway. And, any attempt to compare that or use that as a modicum of voter turnout or voter enthusiasm is just ridiculous because, these are people that would tread, hell or high water to turn out for the president. It's just like these truck parades that have gained steam.
The boat parades,
the truck parades. We had a few here in Kansas City recently. It's like, okay, oh, wow, they had 500 people turn out. I mean.
Here's two things.
Of course they're going to turn out for this.
The Trump campaign just cannot wrap its brain around. One, women make up 51% of the electorate.
Yeah.
You have to make some sort of logical pitch to women, more than just suburban women, just women in general, to attract them to you as a candidate.
Well, I don't know what you're saying. I think
doesn't.
I think
you were going to tell me how he's doing this.
Well, saying vote for me, please, and I saved your damn neighborhood. You're saying that's not a legitimate appeal to suburban women?
I may be getting myself in trouble here, but women do respond to begging.
Oh, that's
I've been married for 25 years. Sometimes a good beg is the only thing you got left. Every husband who watched him beg women, please, please, please like me, we've all been there. When you know you've messed up, and this is all you got, it is a second thing. I'm stalling, Brandon, because I forgot my second thing, so I figured if I just played this out long enough,
would eventually think of it.
But I'll have to pick that up later. But again, the theme is Trump is doing nothing to expand the base. This is
changing.
Totally a base turnout election for him. And I just don't see how any of those numbers add up at this point.
Well, and unfortunately for him, the last couple of weeks, the spotlight has been back on COVID, which is his weakness because of the White House becoming an outbreak zone. And it still is. I mean, think about this. His campaign manager has COVID and is in quarantine. His former campaign manager is in a mental hospital or was and has been released.
Brad Parscale,
Yeah. So talk about a campaign in disarray. I mean, you have over 40 people in the White House who are out with COVID and have to self-quarantine. You had Mitch McConnell, who said last week that he's avoided the White House since July for that very reason. Yeah, I mean, there isn't any coherent message to this campaign. All he has is rallies and showing up for these rallies. The other thing that's interesting, if you've noticed, the president is now holding rallies in Georgia. That is not a good sign, the fact that he has to go to Georgia and Iowa to hold rallies. I would say a similar circumstance to that was back in 2008 when McCain started going to Indiana because the polling became tight. That wasn't a good sign. McCain ended up losing Indiana to Obama in 2008. So very well could see the same thing happen here with Trump losing Georgia and Iowa to Biden and Harris. And in fact, Georgia's polls have really, I think, gone the other way now. There are multiple.
You saw something where Biden's up 7 points in Georgia?
There's one poll that has him up 7.
Right.
There's a few others that have him up between like 2 to 4. But I will say within the last 7 to 8 days, there's been 5 or 6 polls out of Georgia, different polling organizations. None have Trump ahead.
No.
They're all either tied or have Biden ahead. So the momentum is with Biden. That is a shift that we've seen in the polling. And that is significant because that means that Trump has to return to turf that he should have locked up, and he's fighting on that ground. It's also reminiscent of what's happening in the advertising world.
What's his money situation right?
Oh, I mean, he doesn't have any.
That's what I've heard. But didn't he go into this with like literally $1 billion war chest?
And the story of it is just profligate spending. I mean, he spent I forgot how many millions on that Super Bowl ad, which in retrospect was a ridiculous expenditure. Staff salaries, people like Kimberly Guilfoyle, like all of this campaign funds. He had this enormous edge over Biden, and it's gone now.
He just burned through
and now Biden, I mean, has been able to outraise him 3 months in a row, and so it's not even a contest now. The problem is Trump is actually pulling off of the airwaves in places like Wisconsin and Michigan because he can't afford to be on the airwaves anymore. And so in some of these states, the amount of ads are 2-1 Biden-Trump. And so also not a good sign. And, Trump's team is trying to spin that, but there's no positive way to spin that either when you have a campaign that's in debt. You can't manage money just like, dysfunction reigns supreme everywhere else. So that's what we're dealing with. I do want to step back, though, and talk about last week, the announcement by the FBI about this plot against the Michigan governor.
But before we do that, are we done with the rallies? Is there anything positive happening for Trump with these rallies? Because this is going to be his only campaign strategy, I think, for the next 3 weeks. Barnstorm through rallies, and then this dueling town hall thing he had tonight. This is going to be a shit show for Trump.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be just like the last one.
This is
not his specialty. This is not his format. So really, he's down to this and one last debate with Biden.
That's right.
Does any of these debates, or let's talk about the rallies. Is there anything he can do at a rally you think that can turn this around?
No.
And again, I heard today we're up to 60,000 new COVID cases a day in the United States.
Yeah.
That's up from 40,000 just 3 weeks ago.
We have 30 states that have now been deemed super spreader states where, according to methodology, where case counts are rising out of control and up by double digits.
Wisconsin reported reported its highest level of hospitalizations due to COVID
Yeah.
yesterday. So in the middle of all of that, is there anything... Trump has to be damaging himself, I would think, just by putting in everybody's face, I'm immune now and I can do whatever I want, and I'm just going to continue to campaign this way through a pandemic simply because I want to. And if people get sick, I truly just don't care about that.
Yeah. I mean, he has no overriding message he's sending about how he would handle the pandemic, on how he would handle anything. It's basically just all these one-liners, attacks against Biden, Democrats. So he's speaking to and not the audience he needs to win. He's not speaking to unaffiliated voters. They're not tuning in for these rallies. They're not showing up. Neither are the undecideds. And so really it's just a way to energize his base, and to give the perception to the media and to voters that he has momentum of some kind. But really I think it comes down to is he does these because he indulges himself. He gets more out of these.
For it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
these are for him.
These are for him because I think he was itching to return as soon as possible to the rallies because 100%. He has nothing else. And when he's left to his own devices, he stews in the White House on the news, and he goes on insane Twitter rants, and this is an outlet for him, and it's his only outlet.
So you want to talk about the plot against Gretchen Whitmer.
Yeah.
Gretchen Whitmer. I tried to shove it into one
you
word.
Did.
And just say, I tried to say Whitmer. Gretchen Whitmer.
Right.
Help me out. So the first was the big push that like the main guy that did it was not a Trump guy. So there was this huge kind of first influx of data from the media to make sure that there was no linkage between Trump specifically and this plot. And I don't think these folks weren't doing this to support some sort of effort to support Trump's reelection, is my understanding.
No, I mean, I think it's probably pretty obvious who they're voting for.
I think so.
And actually not the ringleader, but I know some of the others they had social media posts that were very supportive of Trump, and that's out there. But this is a militia group. These are members that actually showed up to the state capitol back in, I think, March and April, and were part of the groups that, displayed firearms, that were very loud, very obnoxious. But they are a militia group that actually planned out to kidnap the governor, execute her. They had plans to take over the state government. They actually had plans to then replicate this in other states like Virginia, and topple state governments there. So you look at these guys, and they look like somebody made a joke which I thought was pretty humorous. Like if you look at the 6 or so of them, I forget how many, all of their photos at one time, it looks like the same person, just age progression due to meth use.
Not Michigan's best and brightest.
No,
here.
they're not.
No,
but again, it's alarming because it's part of a larger trend we've seen, right, with the kind of far right extremism being on the rise, and I think it's easy to say, oh my gosh, these people are crazy, and obviously they're not competent. They were caught. But it doesn't always take competence for something to go wrong.
Did they get into the Capitol building with guns, or did they arrest these folks while they were trying to execute this plot, or did they arrest them before?
They arrested them before.
Okay, because I keep seeing pictures of folks with AR-15 style weapons in the Capitol building in Michigan. Was that from the previous protest where they were there?
Yes, that was from the previous protest.
I gotcha.
So they did get into the Capitol back then, and they were part of the crowds, the masses that were protesting the stay-at-home orders. But no, they did not get in the Capitol recently. But it is unnerving, right? Because these people were there, and all it takes is one person to get past security or get within, earshot of, the governor and to do something wrong. And in this case, I think that they had mapped out, they knew where her lake house was, her vacation home.
They had surveilled her lake house, I think. Yeah.
They had surveilled that. So, I mean, they had gone to those lengths. I guess what's most surprising about this to me is that in any normal year, this would be a huge story. We would be hearing about it for days. And now it's just it's just another 2020 story.
Hey, if there's a plot to kill, kidnap, and assassinate a governor of a state.
It also, though, in some ways points to the politicization of the Justice Department, right? Because in a normal case like this, of this magnitude, you would see the Attorney General come out, give publicized remarks on television to the press about how this group was infiltrated and what they did. He did not do that.
No.
So underlings at the FBI have spoken and given statements about this.
I think he came out. He gave a very quick. We don't support any of that.
Yeah, a very very quick statement. But
right.
it wasn't.
He should have held a press conference.
Yeah,
he did
we're
not.
talking about a plot against a governor. And
Yes.
actually a plot that was planned against multiple states. This is actually a form of treason. People throw out the word treason, but I mean, this was treason. I mean, this is trying to overthrow government.
They were actively plotting to overthrow a state's government.
And so I do think, and again, it's looking at it through the lens of, we know that Barr does not hesitate to come out and speak out against Antifa, to speak out against the riots that have been happening. But you have something of this magnitude and he gives a very terse statement. That's it when asked and nothing else. Like, no, that's not acceptable.
How does this hurt or help Trump? I don't think it's fair to tie this to, well, this is just what happens in Trump's America. I don't know if you can take this group and link them in any significant way to Trump or Trump's influence on that group to try to pull off this insane plot to kidnap and murder the governor.
Right.
I think that might be a little bit of a bridge too far, but is it fair to say Trump not creates, but maybe heightens an environment that makes it more acceptable for these folks to get together, communicate, and be much more vocal in public with their views that, we're both dudes. You get a bunch of men together and they get to talking and suddenly now you're planning and then you're hiding in the woods at the governor's house. And now we've got a full-on plot to overthrow the United States.
His tone and rhetoric enables and empowers some of these people. So no, there's no direct correlation, and obviously you can't cast blame on him. But there is, I think, this very significant trend of these groups and people being empowered by we saw that back in 2017 with that lone wolf who did the mail bombs, who
I forgot all about
definitely
that dude.
referenced Trump. So there was that guy. We've seen that with the Boogaloo Boy member who went after and actually killed 2 federal agents in Oakland back in June. I mean, there's been a series of events that we can point to, the Unite the Right rally. Yes, so I think that these groups have typically been underground. They've been marginalized. They haven't been vocal. They feel empowered. They feel that they can be more vocal. They can be more direct. So there is this cultural shift we've seen, right? I mean, it was just like early on when we saw the people who were doing the just extreme behavioral outburst, not wearing masks like at stores, and then some of the racial stuff that we've seen person to person. So there is this feeling that some of this that has just bubbled to the surface and people feel more comfortable just being loud and vocal and going forward. Where it would have just been a thought before, but now it comes out into the open. It becomes a reality.
It's kind of this logical progression. I'm mad about this. I feel like I'm going to be repressed about this. Trump's tweeting, liberate Michigan.
I was going to bring that up. It's a language too.
Yeah.
Liberate Michigan. What does that evoke? It evokes this idea that, that the state is locked up and needs to be freed. So this is a fight for freedom. Where again, it's almost like we had a county commissioner here in Johnson County, Mike Brown, who put this controversial post out on Facebook a couple of weeks ago, basically saying that people need to stock up on arms and talking about civil war, the drums of war beating. God. Completely irresponsible.
That is totally irresponsible.
That is the type of rhetoric that all it takes is for one wacko out there to see that, hear it, and respond and say, okay, I'm ready, and to go and do something crazy.
Let's talk about the Hunter Biden story. This is the story that's kind of dominated the last 2 days.
Yeah.
This is the New York Post story. Allegedly.
Right. Allegedly. That's, again.
Allegedly. And there's 2 really distinct halves to this story. Excuse me. I'm going to drink a water. I saw you grab a drink of soda and immediately my throat goes haywire.
That's how that works. So the New York Post broke this. Nothing in this story has been validated or verified yet.
Well, let's back up a little bit. So yes, the Post wrote this story. The basics that I understand of the story is allegedly Hunter Biden took 3 laptops to a Delaware computer repair store.
Yeah.
The gentleman there did whatever repairs he was hired to do, and they sat for 90 days, and Hunter Biden allegedly never came and picked these up. So let's start first with who this dude is at the Delaware computer store. His name is out there. I don't have his name at top of mind, but I do know, and I'm not taking a shot at the gentleman. He is blind. He is disabled. He does use special glasses and tools to fix computers. This is relevant to the story because he basically said, I cannot swear that Hunter Biden dropped these off. He assumed it was Hunter Biden because he claimed there was a Beau Biden Foundation sticker on one of the laptops. So already we're starting off super duper sketchy.
Yes.
Then he claims once the 90 days happened and Hunter didn't come back and pick these laptops up, he got into the laptop's hard drive. The language this gentleman used, it's obviously he's never fixed a computer in his life, that he got into the computer and found some emails. And he did this in an attempt to find Hunter Biden's, I guess, contact information to call him to say, come pick your laptops up. And in this finding of the emails, he found these emails highlighting this exchange between Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. In Hunter Biden is introducing Burisma executives to Joe Biden for the explicit reason of gaining his favor.
And I assume this happened, the time frame that this meeting would have taken place. This was well after
2019.
2019. Okay.
This is 2019. So that's the whole, and these emails, they are 100% on point for the narrative that Ron Johnson and the Republicans have been trying to stick out into the ether. This is corruption from Hunter Biden, talking to a board member through a job he got by treading on his dad's name. This snaps the narrative together that Trump and the Republicans have been trying to push out into the market just very, very nicely.
Too nicely, right?
It's like a little too nicely.
And the timing. So this computer technician, does he claim that he has these emails, or is he just saying this is what I saw?
He is, I believe, what he is claiming is I got into the laptop and I got into the email. I have no clue what that means. Yeah. Because again, email files just aren't stored on a laptop.
You don't save them.
So
as files.
Did you hack into his Gmail account or an Outlook account? We don't know. But somehow he saw this information, which was these emails, along with videos of Hunter Biden with underage girls doing drugs. Again, this is part of the article. He became extremely concerned about this. This gentleman is also a self-identified Trump supporter and a self-identified conspiracy theorist. And he's also self-identified with an interview he did in the last couple of days that he was very upset over impeachment of Donald Trump. So at this point, he has these emails. He's very concerned. He calls the FBI and he calls 3 congressmen. He's already shopping this story. None of the congressmen bite because they can see through this and say this is absolute crap. Yeah. The FBI does take the laptop, but he never hears from the FBI again. So it's after he doesn't hear from the FBI, he comes out and says, oh, I made a copy of the laptop just to protect myself, a copy of the hard drive, because I wanted to keep these emails, which again, if you know how email works for 90%, that's not how that works. And somehow, Brandon, that copied hard drive got to Steve Bannon, who gave it to Rudy Giuliani. And hence now the email story.
Thanks for putting that together, because I did not know that trail and that timeline of how Rudy Giuliani came into possession of those.
A blind guy who runs a computer repair shop in Delaware. Hunter Biden brings in 3 laptops and abandons them, to which he hacks or gets into the computer, finds the emails, tries to engage somebody in Congress to take an action, and when that doesn't happen, turns it over to Rudy Giuliani. That sounds on the up and up.
Oh, yeah, right.
So while your head's wrapping to that, now let's get to the second half of the story, which is social media's reaction to this story.
So one hole in this story too. It really, I think, requires a suspension of disbelief to think that Biden in 2019 would even agree to a meeting with the Burisma executive, because at that point,
got to be shitting.
This is after Trump has been hammering Biden for these ties. I mean, Biden is smart enough to not go, anywhere near that. If his son came up to him and said, "Hey, I want you to meet," no, I mean, really,
it's just silly.
Come on.
So the second half of this story is now what Facebook and Twitter did.
Yeah.
And this now has really become the story, because most Republicans know the actual story of the emails, the story that we just laid out, that's already fallen apart, and it will continue to fall apart. But in a magnificent display of what a couple weeks ago we called the Streisand effect, or we talked about the Streisand effect, if Twitter and Facebook wouldn't have banned or suppress the New York Post article, this was on a 48-hour news cycle, and this story would have gone away.
Yeah.
Now, suddenly, we've got into this whole other issue of big tech and censorship and politics that has taken on a life of its own. And this is where Republicans are spending most of their time talking about and trying to make political hay here instead of the actual story itself, because they know the story is just dumb.
The story
it's just
nothing.
Absolute dumb. So apparently on yesterday, Facebook outright banned anybody posting about or I haven't been on Facebook in months, so I'm going to get my terminology wrong. Facebook basically removed the story and did not allow anybody to repost or like or whatever this story. They basically blocked the story from Facebook.
Okay.
And what they said was, this is unsubstantiated, and we are not going to post this until it goes through a third-party fact checker. They have precedent for doing this. Remember 3 or 4 weeks ago, or maybe it's been longer than that, when there was a story that Antifa was lighting the forest fires in Oregon? And Facebook did the same thing. They did not post that. They suppressed it being spread out or going viral through Facebook until they could verify it. And when the story wasn't verified, they didn't run it.
Yeah, where that's occurred.
Let me ask you, who you live in this digital world. That seems at least reasonable to me. Is that, way more about social media and how it all connects and how advertising works. Is that a reasonable and fair response to this?
I think so. I mean, it's from time to time, Facebook has their algorithm they've suppressed or surfaced stories. Yeah. It's been interesting too, because the criticism isn't one-sided. There's been criticism on both sides at times that, there's stories on the left or stories on the right that get surfaced. There's been criticism by those on the left that, Facebook has given too much visibility to stories from outlets like Breitbart.
Yeah.
And if you recall, at one point, Facebook had a news section. Do you remember this?
Vaguely.
So this was like, I want to say 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and they would basically surface you like a news feed in addition to your own feed, and it would appear on the right side. But there was so much criticism of the algorithm and which stories they chose to surface versus others that they ended up discontinuing that because just the constant outrage about it. There was just constant accusations that one side or one outlet was being favored. So Facebook has had kind of a long history and controversy. I do think we're at a time, and this problem is only going to be magnified. And the question is, at some point, we're going to have discussion about what it means to regulate the social media giants.
It's coming.
And where the line is, because more and more now they are being viewed as public entities rather than private companies, even though they technically are private companies.
And Facebook is the most friendly social media platform to conservatives.
It is,
by far.
Been, yeah.
So before we jump over and talk about what Twitter's response was, I left out really one important fact in this timeline. On September the 19th of this year, and I don't know what intelligence agency this was, but an intelligence agency came out with an external memo that said, get ready for an October surprise of the Russians releasing hacked Burisma emails. It will be a combination of fake things and real things specifically designed at Joe and Hunter Biden.
Right.
So 4 weeks before this happened, the intelligence community told us that this is coming. We know this is coming. This is a Russian intelligence operation. Be ready for it when it happens. So that's another important piece, that this story has already been debunked by the intelligence community before it ever goes out.
They forecasted this happening. Yeah, I mean, this is so. And again, I think that's why you have to be very skeptical and very critical of all of this, because there is intent behind it, and you have to look who has motive to release this beyond the obvious. I mean, Rudy Giuliani and these political hacks who can't be trusted anyway. But I bet that if you connect the dots and go, further beyond Giuliani, you're going to arrive at Russians.
Yeah. And where Facebook's response, like it or hate it, at least there's some logic behind it, and there was some precedent to it.
Yeah. Now, I think, I think it's different to say, okay, you're going to suppress something initially until you can kind of get to the bottom of it. I think it does become a lasting problem if you suppress it indefinitely and you don't provide the context or reasoning why.
Yeah.
Because then it appears like you're hiding something. And then the story, like you said, takes on a different form. It transforms into a story about, okay, they're all protecting Biden or they're all hiding this. There's information there. And in some ways, it makes people more apt to believe the information rather than not.
This is where Twitter turned a campfire into a forest fire.
Yeah.
Because they basically said, this violates our community guidelines against hacked material or stolen material or material that is released without the consent of the person the material's about. Well, that's absolutely insane.
Yeah. I mean, there's material released every day about people that without consent.
2 weeks ago, when somebody turned over Trump's tax returns without his permission, basically stole them, you had no problem running those.
It's a good example, yeah.
So Twitter here, this is where they just completely get off the rails. And this is where they've caused so much confusion by what is the policy? Why are you doing this? I may not like Facebook's approach, but at least that makes sense.
Yeah.
You're citing something that if you enforce those rules, basically you might as well just be sorority, kids, and picture. Just ban all news.
Those rules,
yeah.
I mean, they're unenforceable. I mean, because if they were going to be
Correct.
consistent, I mean, you wouldn't be able to say anything.
So you basically, Twitter's come out and said, we don't want to deal in hacked information or unproven speculation. Why do you exist then?
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Isn't that like 3/4 of Twitter content?
So when The Atlantic comes out a story about what a butthole Trump is and how bad he talks about military, that is completely anonymously sourced.
Yeah.
And you have 5 people who were on the trip with him say it didn't happen. Twitter still runs that. That's not banned.
Right.
Twitter just absolutely stepped on itself here. So I'm with you. I can sympathize with the social media companies, but I don't know what's the path forward here.
Yeah, I don't either.
If I'm Jack Dorsey and Zuckerberg, it's like, wait a minute, you've been up my ass for 4 years because I didn't do anything when Russia interfered in the 2016 election and put out all this misinformation. Now I take a step to try to block that, and you get up my ass too.
Yeah.
And I am completely sympathetic to the Trump supporter that says, wait a minute, you've been running shit on Trump for 4 years about Russia, from unknown sources, from the Steele dossier, which now is in jeopardy. How can you give a little bit of fair treatment here? How did you run media and social media, all of those stories, but now suddenly you take this much higher ground approach to this story about Hunter Biden? And 2 things can be true at one time. Mm-hmm. Twitter and Facebook's reaction to this could be completely wrong, and the story could be 100% bullshit.
Yeah. And I think both are true.
Both are true.
I don't know, and again, I don't know what the right answer is too, because, I mean, especially Twitter had been hammered by people on the left for not taking action on Trump's tweets, and then they take action and then they get hammered by the right. So this is going to be an ongoing issue that they're going to have to confront. And again, it does speak to, should there be regulation over the social media giants? At one point, you only had one side that advocated that. Now you have people on both the left and the right that seem to advocate for that. So, but that also opens up a Pandora's box. Who does the regulating? How far does it go? And
social media platforms are there to make money.
Yeah.
So you work with how do you use social media to promote your business?
Yep.
What type
social
of
advertising?
What type of ramifications to social advertising would there be if suddenly Facebook and Twitter and other social media giants started to aggressively censor content? How how viable are they still as a money-making platform from an advertising perspective if they start putting those type of algorithms into place, start blocking stories, start censoring stories, start putting warning on stories? Will people still spend like they spend on those platforms?
Probably not, because you also spend to be able to reach, a certain audience. You're trying to go after targeted audiences. And, if they are blocking stories and suppressing content, then they're also going to lose followers and they're going to lose customers that way. And it's going to impact your ability to target those types of customers. Yeah. It's something that has to be confronted. It's interesting. There's an issue right now. Both Google and Facebook, for advertising purposes, has released new guidelines that if you are in industry verticals of, I think home selling, apartment rentals, credit and financing, any of those, you can no longer target prospects based on demographics and based on like zip code targeting. So gender, age, you can't target on race anyway, but gender, age, income, and zip code. So those features are going to be available for other advertisers, but not for those that are in that realm. So there's a lot changing within the targeting and what you're able to do anyway. But there is that, and you have to remember, these social giants, the bulk of their revenue comes from advertising.
Yeah.
Do you know that Facebook, I think it's 98% of all of their revenue is from advertising? 98%. That's
what else
enormous.
do they do other than sell ads?
I was trying to think about that the other day. I'm like, where does that other 2% come from?
That's some sketchy shit. Their other 2%.
Yeah.
Of
what other
revenue?
ways are they monetizing content? I don't know. At least with like Google, Google has like, Google for Business, where you can get like email addresses and apps and stuff. So there's a tiny bit of revenue.
Export and sell data, because that's giving away the secret sauce.
Yeah.
Could you ever see a time where Twitter comes out and says, okay, here's the rules. On presidential election year, 6 weeks before, all political stuff is banned. We're just going to strip it out. News things, news outlets, pundits, and I have no idea how technically you would do this.
Yeah, I think...
But basically, during midterms and election year, for the 6 weeks before, we just don't run that content.
Yeah, I could see that happening. I think Facebook fired the first shot now by, announcing that you could change your ads or run any new ads, I think a week before the election. And you can't run any after the election, which is interesting. I'm like, why would you run any after the election? But then I thought, oh, well, this year of all years.
Yes, that's
that
a
makes
very
sense.
good rule this year.
So it's a very good rule. So I could see that being expanded. I could see Google taking the lead on that for Google Ads. Both Google and Facebook, since 2016, have put in a lot more verification and security requirements. As somebody who does political ads on Facebook for candidates, I find it extremely frustrating, obnoxious. I know why it's done, but like, for example, I have to every year, at least twice a year, verify that I'm a U.S. citizen and I can run these ads. So I have to provide my driver's license, and then the campaigns that I'm doing ads for, I have to verify that they are legitimate campaigns. I either have to provide FEC information for them, EIC number, employer identification number, or evidence that they have filed with local election authorities that they're legitimate. That has to be verified. There's all these steps you go through, and Google is the same. So they've really tried to be able to account for what happened in 2016 with all the bots.
I can't just whip
controls.
up myself as a fake candidate and start running ads for me.
No, you can't. And that's why a lot of that...
the Kansas senatorial election is...
No, you can't. That's why a lot of that activity
has
is migrated to just organic posting. I think Twitter announced, what was it, a week ago, that there were, I think, over 300 bots that were removed that were posing as African Americans for Trump that weren't real.
They were all retweeting the same phrase.
Thing. Yeah.
It's like, well, couldn't you make it a little less obvious if you're the person making the bot?
Not a lot of creativity there.
Not really. Russian hackers aren't very creative.
I don't think so.
It feels like in the next 10 years, we're going to have a First Amendment reckoning. It feels like in the next 10 years, we're going to have to, and I don't know what this means, we're going to have to modernize the First Amendment. And I don't know what form that takes on. But politics is the area that misinformation, the danger of misinformation we all know what that danger is now.
And we live in a new age where that is running rampant.
Yes.
And it's only going to get worse, too, with the proliferation of deep fakes. These videos you've seen where they can change, and so they can
There's
be
an
very
app
realistic.
for it. Have you seen the app where it's called Face Plant or Face
Yes,
something?
but you can do it with like a celebrity.
Yeah,
and, yeah.
So they show like John Wick. And the guy like takes his face and puts it on.
I actually
Keanu
downloaded
Reeves'
that
body or
app. I
something.
wanted to try it out. I haven't tried it out yet.
That's some straight Chinese hacking bullshit there. Brent.
Yeah,
it's gotta be.
It's gotta be. Yeah, I was curious to see what that was all about, but yeah, I mean, it's so that exists, and we've seen deep fakes with Pelosi and other people. That's only going to get worse. So there has to be some type of regulation how you come in and be able to sort through all this, because I mean, you can easily incite mass panics. There's all kinds of things you can do, and we have this situation where we have this proliferation of groups that are thriving because of this. Groups like QAnon, which I define as a cult. I think that they are a cult. Coincidentally, if for anybody locally, there were photos at the local Trump truck rally last weekend of people donning QAnon T-shirts, and so those adherents were there. So they're everywhere. They're here. They're all around us. But that cult has grown exponentially because of Facebook and because they're able to spread their content on Twitter and Facebook. And they do it in a way where it's just below the surface and it's not always immediately recognizable. I mean, they use these, content, that is seemingly innocuous, where they first start by posting about missing kids. And then if they reel you in about the missing kids, then they go into the crazy pedophile conspiracy theories that they have. So we do have to confront this. There's a documentary on Netflix I haven't watched yet that I want to, called The Social Dilemma.
Yeah, I've heard this is really good.
It's supposed to be really good. It dives into this head first because they interview developers and programmers from Facebook and Google and Twitter who are now sounding the alarm, saying, crap, this is dangerous, and they regret some of the work they've done now. So it's startling.
I just can't plot what is our path out of this. I mean,
it's almost like we've already opened the box up.
Yeah.
It's how do you let the genie back in the bottle?
Should we just apply the free market to this? There's some Twitter alternative for conservatives called Parler, I think.
Yeah.
That's got to be the stupidest thing ever. Who in the world would join Parler and hang? That's just silly.
Yeah.
But can you apply a free market solution to this? Can you in some way introduce or encourage enough competition to where this breaks up the tech companies that way?
You could. I think that'll take longer just because you have some of these giants that are so solidified now, almost to the point where they're like public entities. Look at how many smaller social media players we've had that have come and gone. I mean, there's been various ones throughout the years that they just haven't been able to gain the traction. I mean, Google dabbled in the social media space with Google Plus, and that fizzled out.
Yeah.
And there's been a ton of the short video ones that have fizzled
Google
out.
Wave, Google Plus,
Yeah.
Google Glasses. Guys, Google's a great example for all of. They have as many bombs as they do hits.
They do, yeah.
It's just the hits revolutionized everything.
Yep.
And when you have those hits, you can take some chances and do. Google Wave was like horrifying. That was like an email competitor or something.
Oh, I'm trying to remember what that was.
You launched your Wave. It was pretty stupid.
Oh, vaguely.
Vaguely. It flamed itself out very quickly. My point is, Twitter, Google, YouTube, Facebook, they're going nowhere.
Yeah.
Hey, Brandon, you're a billionaire. I'm going to pitch to you. Can I have $500 million to start a rival to Google? No. Because it's not going to succeed. They own the market.
I think one would be more likely we could see is kind of what happened with the development of the internet, where we had ICANN, which is basically the self-governing body for the internet that comes together and controls how that happens. If we had a consortium of all of the players within the social media space come together and create like a international body that they would appoint people to and would resolve kind of these disputes and create like a framework that they all operate under, that might be the best outcome, and that might be the only one that we could come to agreement on. But I mean, it's worked since 1993 for ICANN for the internet. So
let's just say right to it. Percentage chance that in between now and 2024, there's significant regulation in the social media space. I can't see any way around it.
Less than 15%.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this little episode may have helped it along.
Yeah.
If you're interested in this story more, Ben Shapiro did a fantastic podcast today on this. The last 45 minutes of it is really, really good at what type of questions does this arise? These free speech questions. He does a great job of that. The first 15 minutes when he lays out the Hunter Biden story is total bullshit because he takes the Biden story at face value.
Yeah.
And what he leaves out is this didn't pass the sniff test. This has already been debunked by the intel community. There is no legitimate media outlet other than the New York Post that will run this story. This story has been shopped for over a year and shot down. So without that context, how can you even evaluate the First Amendment decisions? You can't.
No.
So now we're just going to bitch at each other. Right back where we are.
Sounds about right for 2020.
Do you have any concerns about ACB on the court? Have you seen anything in the last couple of days?
I mean,
that's given you
I
pause?
do. I guess I haven't been surprised by much during the hearings because I expected that she would be very circumspect and very guarded, which she has been. I mean, there were some questions I felt like she should have hit it out of the park and said, answered directly when it came to, does the president have power to suspend an election?
She said, did she answer that question? I think she danced around it.
She danced around it. She did not answer it directly. When she was asked about, I think, the ability of minorities, whether or not, their voting authority could be diluted directly by the president, she just referenced the 14th Amendment and said that's the answer.
Yeah.
But she was asked directly about the president. She was hesitant to say, no, the president cannot X, Y, and Z. She would reference, no, that can't be done because of this or that. But it was very clear she did not want to go after the president or put herself in opposition to the president on anything.
Yeah.
Which I guess in some cases makes sense. I mean, knowing this president, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of open questions still, I think, on how she would act. Obviously, an election dispute. She said she would not recuse herself from an election dispute, if one arose. So how would she handle that? Which side would she come down on? I mean, there's a lot of those questions to be answered.
I forget the senator who asked this, but I loved it when one senator is asking her questions and she's just given the RBG answer all the time. I'm not going to talk about a hypothetical case. So the next person gets up, and I think this might have been Sheldon Whitehorse. I don't know who this was. Basically says, so you'd support Loving versus Virginia. You wouldn't try to overturn that, would you? This is where the Supreme Court said the state
interracial marriage.
Yeah.
Yep.
She's like, oh yeah, that wouldn't get overturned. And Brown versus Board of Education, you can tell me that you're cool with that one too, right? Oh yeah, that one. Okay, Roe v. Wade. No, sorry. I can't hypothetically talk anything about that. I watched about 6 hours.
Yeah.
Totally fucking useless.
Right.
Once again, this deserves.
You watched more than I did.
This deserves an F-bomb because it's a complete waste of everybody's time.
Yeah.
Anybody apply or anybody in the nomination process for Supreme Court justice, one of the most powerful positions in the country, we've just decided you don't have to answer any questions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have. I mean, that wasn't the case back in the 80s and 90s, but we've made that the case now. The one answer I found interesting was on the healthcare question with the Affordable Care Act, because there's a case coming before the court in November, shortly after the election. She did leave out the possibility that entire law wouldn't have to be overturned. You could overturn parts of it without overturning all of it. And I forget the legal precedent she cited for that. But again, she was very careful and guarded on that too. She wouldn't say one way or the other.
I did like it when she said, why do you keep looking to the Supreme Court to solve your problems? I think it was Hamilton in the Federalist Papers said, we carry nor the sword or the purse. How much harm can we do? Why have you guys? Well, we know it's because you've just stopped legislating. So now everything is legislated through the courts.
Yeah, that's right.
I did like that answer because I thought that was very true. If you don't like the ACA and the Supreme Court shoots it down, make another law.
Yeah.
It almost feels like we've used all of our law vouchers and we can't make any more. So we have to mitigate the ones that are on the books through the Supreme Court.
Well, and the Supreme Court has become the de facto authority for, releasing legislation because, both sides see it as the ultimate arbiter. And so there's been an over-reliance on it. And I think that's a question we've asked how many times on this podcast? Like, it's nauseating.
Biden will not expand the Supreme Court. I don't believe he's going to. He's too much of a traditionalist in the Senate. He's too much a creature of the Senate.
Yeah.
He's not going to do that. The filibuster rule might come into play, but I don't think an expansion of the Supreme Court is something that he's really gonna really get behind.
I don't think so either. It's possible. Anything's possible, but I think it's more likely we would see statehood for places like D.C. and Puerto Rico.
I think so.
To expand Democratic voting power, which would give them an edge in future elections, and that would provide them with the ability to do a lot more legislatively rather than having to rely on the courts. It takes the court argument somewhat off the table.
Do you think that's a good idea, Puerto Rico and D.C. as states?
I don't know. I have mixed feelings on that. I've been to Puerto Rico a couple times. I know that it's interesting because both political parties in Puerto Rico strongly support statehood.
Yeah.
There's an argument to be made. Puerto Rico has 4 million people, more than many U.S. states. U.S. citizens, but they can't vote in our elections. D.C., U.S. citizens for every purpose except having actual representation, voting representation in Congress. There are ways to address that with D.C. without making them a state.
Yeah.
Although the statehood is the easiest path. Puerto Rico, not so much. But I think it's become on the table in recent years, just with all the focus on voting representation and lack of. But I don't know. I'm kind of, I don't know. I struggle with that one.
I do too. It's a straight power play by the Dems.
Oh, yeah, clearly is.
100%. Because they know you're adding 4 senators, and in this era of partisan divided government, that could be an unsurmountable majority at that point in time.
And there are groups in both of those places, both in the district and in Puerto Rico, that have fought for statehood for decades. But it is a political play. The Democrats actually had the ability to do this after Barack Obama's election when they controlled all 3 branches, and they did not.
Probably should have done it.
And they should have probably done it then, along with several other things. It was interesting to see what they chose to expend political capital on and what they chose not to.
I hate to say this to all my Republican friends, but get ready for some European-style parliamentary socialist government, because that's the corner you've backed us into. The majority's coming, and we're coming hard this time.
You said the word that we don't say on this podcast, socialist. That's
there's no more norms.
Yeah. All norms are gone.
If it can be done, it will be done. Republicans, you should pray that Biden is going to be the next president.
Did you know, I found this article from way back in 2016, and I didn't realize this at the time, but there were Republican senators on the record in 2016 in the aftermath of what was happening with the Garland nomination who said that if Hillary Clinton were to be elected, that we should go permanently to just 8 members on the Supreme Court and shrink it and just not allow her to appoint a new person.
And why is that, Brandon? Tell us the Republican strategy around why that makes sense for Republicans.
It's a power grab. It's about
because you're not going to be frequently visiting the White House.
Yes. Exactly. But again, that's why they have no moral ground to stand on, because they have been willing to change the makeup of the court, the composition of how many members when it suits them. So for them to cry foul and you try to use this as an issue now, nobody's buying it.
Which leads us to Mitch McConnell's week. Let's end with the Mitchell on Sean Hannity. Did you see this video clip?
I think I might have. I think this is what I saw.
Sean just can't figure it out. Well, how did Obama leave over 200? How did all these judges? I can't understand. McConnell laughs. He laughs that weird chuckle he has and says, "I'll tell you, I held him open. That's all me." He just freely admits it. I at some point, here's my prediction for the election. Trump's going to lose.
Yeah.
And I strongly believe we are going to take the Senate. And we're going to have this 2-year run with the American people saying this is what a permanent Democratic majority looks like. Do you want this? Do you don't want this? If you don't want this, just do what we typically do in the midterms. Just give the House or the Senate back to the opposite party, and we'll just sit for 2 more years bitching about it and elect somebody else.
Yeah.
But nothing is off the table. Biden is the Republicans' saving grace, because he's going to be the restraint against the AOCs and the Warren and the Bernie wing, not the enabler of them. Once he's gone, all bets are off.
Yeah.
And I do think they get rid of the Senate filibuster.
I can see that happening, yeah.
And I'm sorry. It's time we spend way too much time focusing on the rights of the minority party. Who gives a shit? That's the attitude of us right now. When we grab the rig of power this time, we're not going to give it up willingly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is going to get really bad.
I could see that happening, yeah. And I think it's we've been leading up to this for a while.
I'm not saying this to you as a Republican. I'm saying this to all Republicans. You deserve it. You've got this coming. You have begged for this. Here it comes. The minority party in power the minority party in the country has overplayed its hand. Yeah. And the majority now is going to reassert itself. And I don't see any way around it. And it has to happen, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's probably past due.
You would never lobby for 4 more years of Trump.
No, not in any capacity. I mean, I'm just, it's been a nauseating 4 years. I mean, the prospect, the thought of even entertaining another 4-year term, I can't even sustain that. It's not possible. For you,
someone who takes politics seriously and connects to this on multiple levels, that would be like shutting down. How would you'd have to shut down major parts of your life, I would think, because it's like, I can't even. I'm almost at the ending point for me where it's like, I can barely follow this anymore. If Trump wins, I'm not sure what the next steps are for me.
I don't either. I
don't know where we're at.
I mean, I may have to seriously consider giving up politics completely, which I'm just like, I'm at that point. Yeah.
We may turn this podcast into another topic. Because if Trump wins, I don't think I could stand here for 4 more years.
I can't talk about
and bitch about Trump.
4 years. No.
I just can't do it. Let's talk about something fun. I actually did watch a new special on Netflix that was very funny.
Oh, what's that?
Do you know who Bert Kreischer is, the comedian that takes his shirt off, the big fat guy? He has a special on called The Cabin. And it's him and a bunch of his comedian friends. His big thing is life's too crazy.
I've heard about this, yeah.
I'm going to go decompress in the woods for a while.
Okay.
He sells his wife on this, and then he's like, I'm going to get bored. I'll just start inviting my buddies over. And it's just all comedians, and they just do stupid stuff mixed in with a little bit of personal introspection while they're there. But it's very funny. And it's 12-year-old boy funny. Yeah. Like people mooning people and butts and getting naked in hot tubs and smashing things. So if you're just in the mood to watch adults act really stupid and laugh, I could certainly recommend The Cabin.
Okay, I'll have to check that out. I finished season 2 of The Boys on Prime. Have you started that one yet?
This is the one I'm afraid to watch it, because if it's bad, I'm going to be so disappointed.
No, it's good. There's so many parallels. There's so many parallels with what we're going through right now. Like they talk about deep fakes and manipulation of mass media. There's an AOC type character. I mean, there's all of these.
I'm going to pound through that this week.
There's super hyper nationalism that's used, like rah rah America.
Did
like,
they release that one episode at a time, or did they release everything?
So they released. No, it's been one episode at a time.
Okay, I officially hate Amazon Prime.
I can't. It was weird. I made
protests.
They started it by releasing 3 episodes together, and then after the first 3, it was one at a time through the season finale. But there's only 7, so it's easy to get through.
Nothing chaps my ass more than that.
Yeah,
I want.
You want instantaneous gratification. That's what you want.
I pay you for your content. Let me consume it how I wish to consume it.
Yeah.
If I want to watch them all in one night, why do you give a shit?
Right.
You got your $10 or whatever a month. Why do you care? I am actually getting mad over this.
The other, I guess, series I watched Ratched on Netflix. It's the origin story of Nurse Ratched. From One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's a very gritty. It's 1940s noir type vibe to it. somewhat bloody and gory a little bit, but it's fascinating, and they make her out, Nurse Ratched, to be a somewhat sympathetic character. You at least know why she became unhinged and became the person she became. There was a lot of crazy stuff that happened in her childhood and as a young person, and you see that develop. And there's a couple of lobotomy scenes which are interesting. Those never get old.
Didn't they used to just take like a metal rod?
Yes, they would.
And just like there's 2 spots on your forehead, and they just
or
ram
they
it
would do
through
what
you?
they called the frontal lobotomy, which was through the eye socket. They would go here through, and then they would use, and it was almost like an ice pick. Actually, those were dubbed ice pick lobotomies. And the fact that these were ever even done, because you read the accounts, and the mortality rate was like 17% for these. Most people had lifelong issues. Their entire personalities changed. They had the most famous example is probably the Kennedy daughter, not Rose Kennedy.
No.
Was it Rose?
I do remember this story that they had her committed and they had her lobotomized.
Yeah, and she was she was probably mildly slow, autistic.
She could have been mildly schizophrenic.
Right, but she was, a normal person. She could think, she could talk, she could write. So the lobotomy, after that, she became like a human vegetable. She couldn't speak. She was permanently confined to a wheelchair. She was put in an institution. It's really a sad story because Joe Kennedy Sr., he had it done while his wife was out of the country.
Yeah.
And she didn't even know about it. And then they lied to the children about it. They didn't tell them exactly what happened until years later.
What's the goal of the lobotomy? Is it just to put you in kind of a permanently vegetated state?
No, that's not the goal. The whole goal was, if we take out part of your brain, it may help you overall being able to function. The idea of it sounds crazy now. Like, really? You're going to take out a part of my brain that's going to make me cognitively better?
And these were in the 50s, right?
They started in the late 20s, and they went through, they stopped really in the late 50s, early 60s. The guy who started them, who had no surgical training, and who a lot of patients died under his care. I think the youngest he did was like 4 years old, 4-year-old girl. In some cases, there was a kid who his mother had him lobotomized just because he was 12 and he would run away from home and he would eat his vegetables. And so some of the reasoning was insane. But yeah, it finally stopped. It became discredited. But for a while in the profession, this was routinely done. There were somewhere in the neighborhood of 50,000 Americans lobotomized. In Europe, it was 70,000 before all was said and done. But
so let's end this with turn.
I don't know how we got onto lobotomies.
Let's turn that into a positive.
Yeah,
maybe the positive is to say within 70 years, our knowledge of the human brain has gone from me feeling like, to make you better, Brandon, I'm going to jab an ice pick into your eye, to where we are now.
We have progressed quite a bit, so we should be happy about that.
How the brain works, mental health in general. We've stopped thinking the way to solve this problem is to ram a rod into your brain.
Yeah.
And we've actually found some better ways to do it.
And the fact that was ever thought... By the way, it's Rosemary Kennedy. Rose was the mother. Okay. Rose Kennedy, and then the daughter was Rosemary Kennedy.
I remember reading the story, and you're right. It was a huge scandal, and how they hid this. They hid this from the family.
Well, it's just really sad because this was a girl... yes, she was slow and she had problems, but, it became much worse. She ended up losing all cognitive function, ability to speak.
I am a father. The only way you can do that is if you don't see your child as human.
Yeah, I don't understand.
Do that.
Yeah.
If anybody said we're going to take your kid in and no. You just don't see that child as a human being.
But that's what I don't understand, Craig. So this went on as long as it did, and for the vast majority of people, they came out of this procedure worse than before. So how do you justify that this is a good procedure? I would
think maybe somebody would say, hey, I rammed the ice pick in Brandon's eye, and it didn't seem to make it better.
That didn't really help.
Maybe we shouldn't do that again. Yeah. I don't know.
But we've learned.
Hey, we're going to get a vaccine for coronavirus soon. We've progressed in this.
We have, yeah.
This is, again, I hate people who talk about the good old days. And Lindsey Graham got in trouble because he used
the good old days of segregation, yes.
Which is dumb.
It is dumb.
He misused a phrase. Come on. Yes. Was it stupid to say? Yes. Should he have turned the phrase differently? Yes. Does it mean he's some sort of segregationist? No. He just used a bad word choice, and we jumped all over him. So
yeah.
While I hope Lindsey Graham loses, and I will drink a glass of wine to the universe
if he does,
election night if he loses, but I not counting on that happening.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, that would be a star on the wall. And if he loses, I mean, it's a very bad night for Republicans.
Yes.
I am standing by. I mean, the pickups. Despite what happened in North Carolina, I think Democrats pick up North Carolina still. They pick up Maine. They pick up Colorado. I think Iowa is very likely as well now too. And then there's some others there. You start looking at Montana. So there's a lot of possibilities, and it's a question of margin now.
Oh, and Susan Collins' speech is going to be so fantastic when she concedes. I don't give a shit if it's 3 a.m. I'm going to stay up to watch that.
Be awake
because just for her, I don't understand what happened. It's just going to be awesome.
Yes.
All right, that's our hour. Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Craig.